Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, hello, lovely listeners, and welcome to episode 167 of the Assist with Impact podcast. And yes, my first episode back in 2023. If you can hear a dull sort of humming sound in the background, that is the sound of my Dyson fan, currently keeping me cool in the middle of January here in Sydney. Back from holidays, first day back at work, and it wouldn't be my first day back at work if I wasn't, it would just not feel right if my first day back at work did not involve recording a podcast episode, because you guys, my beautiful listeners, are my favourite people in the whole wide world. So I want you all to know that and be out there thinking that and hearing that from me as we get into 2023, that I really appreciate you tuning in and being there listening to my little dulcet tones. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you had a safe and happy and healthy holiday season. Whatever you did, whether you're of the Christian variety or of some other denomination that you celebrated in the turn of the calendar, in whatever fashion worked for you. Now, today's episode, it is in some ways, it's a bit of a funny episode, because when I was thinking about doing a first episode for 2023, I was thinking about this whole idea of, that it is the idea of getting off to a strong start, and the idea of, the great thing about a new year is the idea that it is a fresh slate. And I'm literally sitting here looking at my 2023 year planner, and whilst there's already a lot of things on there, there is a lot of blank space, and it's that idea of that there's just so much possibility and potential in a new year, and that's something that, to be grateful for. But as I thought about it, it actually made me think about something that I have talked about previously on the podcast. In fact, let me go to the episode. It was way back in mid-2020, when we were in the first wave of, that first year of the pandemic. It was episode 107. I put an episode out where I talked about why executive assistants are the human equivalent of a Slinky. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I'll put the links in the show notes of this episode. But it got me thinking, as in terms of, when I think about that episode, and what I talked about in that episode was the idea of this human, the assistant being the human equivalent of the Slinky toy, that sort of spiral toy that can bounce forward, can go downstairs, can just, reorient itself, and, and it is just, it's quite amazing to watch. And in 2020, I did this episode and I posted on my website talking about why assistants are the human equivalent of a Slinky. And I talked about the power skills assistants needed to demonstrate during the pandemic, and that adopting a Slinky mindset showcased 4 of my power skills. In particular, I talked about it showcasing your adaptability, your flexibility, your creativity, and your resilience. And so if I look at my 10 power skills, we're talking about, that's still consistent today in terms of those 4 power skills being really key to you and your success, and being able to really occupy and own that linchpin zone. And what I talked about at the time was that I was at the time working with assistants who were showing up with a Slinky mindset. So shout out to some of you who I know will be listening. So Vanessa, I know you're out there listening, and we're going to be catching up for lunch in a couple of weeks, aren't we? But, I suggested at the time that, and this was during the pandemic, that the way you could do that if it was a new concept to you and you wanted to take this on board was the idea of being intentional around things like the frequency and the method of your communication with your leader, with the leader that you supported and the stakeholders that you were engaging with, about recognizing that delivering outcomes and understanding the impacts that your leader and your organization were seeking to make was more important than just being focused on the outputs. And I talked about this idea that never gets old, that you are a leader as an assistant, that you don't need that ER after your title. You don't need to be tagged as a leader in your title to be able to lead from where you are, and that leadership is a mindset, not a title, and that you can lead from where you are. So, that episode and that post that I tied it to back in 2020 is still just as relevant today. And it's just as relevant for you embarking on 2023 and looking into this new year and this idea of, well, how do you want to, reevaluate or have people reevaluate you in 2023. Those are 4 key attributes that you can consider in terms of how you have been showing up and how you could be showing up going forward in 2023. But the other thing about this idea of a Slinky mindset that I also don't want you to lose sight of is something else that I talked about during that period, which was the idea of, and I did another post on this, another blog post on this in 2020, of the idea that Slinkies, the toy, they can get tangled up as well. So as we embark on 2023, let's not forget that as assistants, we can get tangled up. We can get tangled up in managing conflicting priorities. We can get tangled up in managing other people's expectations. We can get tangled up in not setting and maintaining our boundaries so that we can ensure that we can be that effortless Slinky, mastering and being able to manage those sets of stairs and those more complex terrains that we have to manage as an assistant, because it's not always smooth surfaces, is it? So that's something that also applies in terms of this idea of you, like a slinky, bouncing forward into 2023. And I don't want you to not have that on your radar. So you've heard me talk before about the idea of having that 3 Ps conversation with your manager, with the leader that you support or the leaders that you support. And if that's something that you haven't already done, well, there's no time like the new year to do that, to say, well, we're in a new year, clean slate. Before we get too bogged down in rolling into the momentum of 2023, how about we sit down and have some time, you and I, to just do have a conversation around your preferences, your priorities, and your pet peeves, so that I can make sure that I'm clear on them, so that I can make sure that I'm supporting you as effectively as possible. So, I'm looking at myself doing this recording, and I've just gone over 10 minutes. So this is a very short and sweet episode. Again, I would like to say thank you to you for listening to me and having this podcast in your podcast feed. If you have not already done so, I would love you to do something for me. I would love you to consider leaving me a rating and a review on Apple Podcast if that's where you listen to your podcast, because it helps other people find the Assist with Impact podcast. And as always, if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn or following me on Instagram, I would love to connect with you on one or other of those platforms. So come and find me, Liz VV over on Instagram, or look for Liz Van Vliet over on LinkedIn. And I would love to hear from you. So feel free to drop me a message, a DM, or an email at liz@myeacareer.com to let me know how 2023 has kicked off for you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.